Hello and welcome to yet another Human Synergistics live webinar. My name is John Van Etten. Very happy to be joining you today on the topic of mastering the GSI report. So for those of you who may not be familiar, the GSI is an instrument from Human Synergistics used to measure team dynamics, essentially behavioral patterns that play out in groups and teams, and how those patterns influence the well-being and performance of team members. So today's session, we'll be talking about really how to get the most out of this tool, and we'll be taking a look at the new online interactive report as well. So the discussion today is really primarily intended for people who are accredited in Human Synergistics group styles inventory instrument, or for organizations, teams who are using this tool to drive high performance for the purpose of development in your groups and teams. So how do we get the most out of this report and this instrument? Well, let's take a little bit of a closer look just to introduce the GSI. Again, as I mentioned previously, it's designed to measure those team dynamics. So if you see the model on the right-hand side of the slide, that circular model toward the bottom, our circumplex that we use to illustrate those patterns. Again, we're measuring those patterns within teams and groups. Those patterns of behavior, the way groups and team members interact with one another, approach tasks, and attempt to solve problems, then influences the way in which we utilize our skills and ultimately the way in which that team or group solves problems. So we're looking at a causal model based off of team dynamics. And the purpose of this is to understand, really what is playing out in our team or group. How is it affecting our team members and our ability to perform at our best? And moving forward, what are the kinds of things that we as team members can and should be doing more often, more frequently in order to drive our team forward and more consistently create the kind of performance that we would like to see from our team or group? To be honest with you, the GSI is used in very broad development purposes. So not only for creating and driving high performance, for example, within teams and groups, but over the years, it's also been used very frequently for broader purposes. For example, for the purpose of culture development. Very often, the group styles inventory is used with management teams, leadership teams to understand how we're currently interacting as leadership and management teams, how that's perceived, and again, what we can do in order to work in ways that are more consistent with our values, and also set a standard for and role model what we're trying to create and drive within our organization more broadly. So connecting this kind of team development to broader topics like culture development. Okay. Again, we have a lot of presentations, content, and material on these specific instruments. So if you're interested in the tool and digging deeper into it, please reach out anytime. Happy to support. But for the purposes of our webinar today, that's the model of the GSI. And then secondarily, of course, just one little graphic around the fact that this really matters. The way in which teams interact with each other and approach the tasks that they have, the behaviors that play out, and especially the patterns that develop over time are tremendously influential in driving not only the performance of teams, their ability to do their best work, make effective decisions, solve problems, as we can demonstrate and have focused our research on, but also influences, team member satisfaction, commitment to team decisions, level of stress, and so very broad, again, speaking to the very broad purpose by which these tools are used, and a little illustration here in terms of when we look at teams that operate and work in more constructive patterns. Primarily, we're seeing radically more positive well-being and performance scores of those teams and groups than we are seeing from groups and teams that operate in less constructive and more defensive patterns. Again, if you're interested in any more information on what that's all about and how that really works, what we're measuring with that instrument, please feel free to reach out anytime. Again, for the purpose of our session today, actually, I'd like to switch gears and jump right into the GSI report. So this instrument can be used, again, with groups and teams, a minimum size of 3 individuals. Human Synergistics, we've been using this tool for over 40 years globally. It not only can be and has been administered in paper format for decades, but now, of course, more recently, we have online forms of this instrument, and I wanted to take a moment before we get into the report to really illustrate the strengths of this new online format of the group styles inventory. Firstly, if you're familiar with other human synergistics tools, you may know that our reports tend to be, quite thorough and provide you with a lot of good information. One thing that I do hear from some of our clients is we like sort of short input in terms of content. And the GSI is the shortest of our tools, both in terms of the number of questions that we're asking participants in the surveys, but also in terms of the report content. As you'll see in a moment, we're really just talking about a few key pages of information. So really very, very focused in terms of the feedback that we're getting in the GSI. Secondly, the online format, again, from my perspective, is really phenomenal. It's not just nice to have in a digital form, but it changes the way that the tool is really used. Many of the accredited consultants and practitioners who use the group styles inventory to coach and develop teams have learned that the new online format is so flexible and accessible that we can use it almost in real time. So this means that if you're accredited in GSI, it's really the only tool from Human Synergistics that you have the ability to build the project yourself, invite participants to join and answer the survey independently of Human Synergistics, and even to score the reports in real time and get the report that we're just about to look at immediately. So this is actually all possible within about 15 to 20 minutes from the time of sending invitations, people answering the questions, scoring, and generating the report. So this really means that the tool is, again, tremendously accessible. I've had several clients who, when we're sitting down as a leadership team, for example, and discussing our strategy and priorities moving forward, let's say the conversation doesn't go in the most constructive direction. It starts to devolve. We start to run into some conflict and challenges within this leadership team. We can put the brakes on right there, sort of stop, pause, consultant stepping in and saying, let's see what is going on, what's happening right now. Email everyone a little link. They can access that on their phones, tablets, any kind of device. Again, very short questionnaire. And within 10, 15 minutes, you, the accredited practitioner, have a diagnostic picture of what the team dynamics are that just played out in front of you. And now we can start to have a deeper question about not only what is going on, but how is that affecting us as leaders, our ability to work effectively as a team, what we're role modeling to our people. And now we have something that's tangible and actionable about what is going on in this team group, and we can begin to leverage that moving forward in a developmental way. So I really love that about the new online GSI. Again, that's something that you can, as an accredited practitioner, administer yourself without any contact with HS across a variety of languages, and you'll get the kind of report that we're just about to dive into now. All right. The other piece of advice I always say before we get into reports in terms of getting the most out of them is being clear on why we're using them. All of Human Synergistics instruments are diagnostic instruments for the purpose of development. So really, before we're debriefing the tool, we need to have a clear context, again, around what is the purpose, why are we using this, what do we hope to improve and develop, and so on. And that context is then very, very helpful to connect as we move into the report. So that helps us to prioritize the findings and create a justification for the action steps to follow. Okay. So I'll try to switch us into our online report. This will take just a moment. I have to remove our beautiful graphic, and then the sharing of the screen. We have to travel interdimensionally here for a moment to use that. If this all functioned well, then you should be seeing a screen that I'm sharing, which is the up in the upper right hand corner, probably a little difficult to see, is labeled group styles inventory. So this is the online, again, interactive report that you would receive as a function of not only, completing and scoring a GSI with a team. This introductory page is really just designed to explain, what is the group styles inventory, what is this instrument, and what is the purpose of using it. So just one brief page of text to give an introduction. Again, anyone using this instrument is already accredited in the tool and certainly understands, in detail what the instrument is, how it functions, what it's used for, and so on. But again, if we're debriefing this to a leadership team, it's nice as reference to have a description of what this is all about. Okay, the next tab, and by the way, there's a nice little button up here on the left where we can access tabs. The next one I'll jump to is the GSI profile itself. So by selecting that, then we can immediately see this group's profile. So we can see it's a fairly small group. At the bottom of the profile, you can see the number of people who responded, and again, the team's profile. What's really nice about this, I think, is the fact that, again, this is completely interactive. So, for example, if we click on aggressive, defensive styles over here on the left, we should get, there we go, a description of what are aggressive defensive styles. What do we mean by that? How do we define that? So this is referring to really the cluster level of our instruments. Then secondarily, we can click on each of the individual styles within the model, and then we get a very nice text description of what that style is all about. Again, best practices, it's very nice to have those descriptions to refer to. Oftentimes, and this depends a bit on language, but particularly styles like perfectionism and competitive, as you may well already be aware, it's nice to have the clear description of what we are referring to in terms of those patterns. In any case, for each of the 12 styles, not only do you get a nice description of what that's all about and a description of where we have scored as a team with reference to the norm group, but we can also dig down into the items themselves. So again, the GSI is the shortest of all of the human synergistics inventories, only 6 items per scale. So we can begin to dig into all the way down to the item level. And also, and I think perhaps even more helpful, is not so much the items as the second tab there below, recommendations or suggestions for change. So this is something we have added to several of our reports, sort of customized recommendations for development, particularly by style. If you're familiar with our LSI and LWS tools, particularly the LSI Plus, you'll be familiar with recommendations in those instruments. And here again, we have specific recommendations for development by style within the GSI. So if we're thinking by looking at our profile that we might want to work on developing a little bit more achievement and perhaps reducing or moving away from the opposing dependence, which has become a little strong in this team's profile, then not only can we, again, understand what that is in terms of a definition and what the actual questions were, but we can begin digging down into what are some action steps that will help us to promote that achievement orientation within our team. And secondarily, what are some action steps and suggestions to move away from those existing patterns with independence. So not only is this, again, a much shorter format of the feedback that we typically provide in our reports, which I think it helps us to really focus and get right to action steps and answer that all important question that our clients have around, not only what is happening, but, give me the top 3 things that we need to do right away to start changing this. And again, this is a very nice report in terms of understanding what the overall patterns are, allowing us to discuss that, understand that in context of what just took place, recognize the reality of it, and then immediately begin moving into, okay, here's a few patterns that we would like to focus on moving forward. How can we do that? What shall we do? What can we commit to as a team? How can we hold each other accountable to that? and so on. So very, very helpful, not only for the team, also, of course, for the accredited practitioners and coaches, not only to have reliable and valid information that you can rely upon, but these specific direct recommendations for development, giving us those action steps that we can begin building upon immediately. All right. So again, very nice to click through this. I find the interactive experience is very helpful. We always like to do these debriefs face to face if possible, but these days there's always one or two people in the coming in remotely for these kinds of debriefs. Anyway, this kind of interactive report works very well in a digital format. We can share the screen. We can all click through, see the same thing, talk about the same discussion. Very, very helpful for guiding teams and groups. Okay. That was the group's profile. So again, that's all of the feedback combined. You saw this as 4 people. I'll back up one tab because also in the online reports, you can also see individual profiles. So the accredited practitioner is in complete control of this, really, whether you show or allow individual profiles to be shown or not. And if so, who sees them is completely under the control of the accredited practitioner. Another really nice feature. I find individual profiles to be quite helpful, more for the purpose of illustrating the various perspectives of team members and how that comes together to create an overall team dynamic, but also how each member of the team may have slightly different perspectives on the group. That is also, depending on the purpose of the coaching and development, can be very interesting and insightful discussions. So here we're looking at one of the feedback respondents' description of the group. Again, a completely interactive format of that report. So each of the individuals can not only see the team profile, the overall patterns within the group and team that are truly driving the overall performance of the group, but I can also see what I personally described, what I saw, my perspective, how that might differ. And again, we can utilize that and leverage that for further debriefing and coaching discussions. The third tab here is to look at the comparative, sorry, fourth, I guess, technically, is to look at the comparative profiles. Comparatives is really what I was basically referring to, where we show not only the group profile, but each of the individual profiles broken out, so that we can look at the variance in terms of those descriptions. This is a nice, we just included these two, but this is a nice example of, yes, there are differences between this individual's perspective and the combined team result. And while it's typically most helpful to pay your priority attention to the overall description, it's interesting to understand and also potentially discuss the differences of individual perspectives. So I find very helpful to have that kind of level of comparative. Okay. So again, if we think back to the GSI model that we discussed before, that model was firstly looking at the patterns playing out within the group and team, and that's what we've discussed so far. Secondarily is to look at how those patterns are influencing and affecting the well-being of team members, as well as their ability to perform. So that's really getting down to the next tab in the interactive report, which is the outcome section. So we look at a variety of outcomes in groups and teams, aspects of effectiveness and performance, commitment to the group's decisions, satisfaction being a member of the team, and so on. And we look at those both in terms of individual scores, team scores, and compare those back to larger global norm reference bases. So we can see, where is our team scoring currently? How might I perceive the team differently? And how does our team perform or score across these criteria as compared to thousands and thousands of other teams around the world? So lots of very, very helpful and insightful feedback here. Again, the outcomes are primarily something that we focus on and dig into in order to understand, again, how the patterns within the current teamwork are influencing those kinds of KPIs and performance criteria. And again, at the end of the day, if we want these types of scores to improve, sort of regardless of where they are currently, we can understand based on these instruments what kind of behavior we as a team need to focus on, engaging in more frequently and more consistently. So that too. So that's really the benefit of these developmental tools. These are not assessments of our team is a high performing team or not effective team, right? That's not what we're doing. We're trying to understand, or we are understanding, not only what is playing out in the team currently, how we are currently performing, and more importantly, understanding the relationship between those behaviors and performance, thereby moving forward. Again, we can coach and develop teams to engage in the behaviors that more consistently positively affect their performance. And that data driven scientific approach to this kind of development is really, I think, the secret behind the consistency of success that we see in the positive development of our clients. Okay, so that's really the report content beyond the participants guide. So the last tab in that menu, it takes you to an online ebook, which is the GSI participants guide. I really love this book. It's got some content to it. This is 54 pages. And really digs into what is the GSI, what are we measuring, but I think more importantly, each of the styles within the models themselves. I'm trying to get the pages to move, but I seem to have a loading problem. We'll get there. Each of the styles themselves, the motivations behind it, how these things are playing out, likely consequences of it, even nice little cartoons that give us the theme, action steps, worksheets, and so on. So if the report is, the interactive report as we've been looking at is, too little content for you, if you're looking for a little more meat, then you certainly have that in the next piece of content, the participants guide. For those of you who are accredited in this tool, you'll recall this guide, something we refer to and go through quite a bit in the accreditation process. But again, very, very helpful to understand what are these patterns, how are they playing out, what's the motivation behind them. Again, what kind of effect are they having on our people and our team? And moving forward, how can we choose to and focus on, again, engaging in more of those behaviors that lead our team forward and contribute to our success, and role model the kind of culture that we want from our people in our broader organization. So wonderful report. I think it balances very nicely both the depth of human synergistics tools and instruments, as well as the need for a clear, prioritized action list that we can implement and begin using in a real and tangible way. I think GSI, maybe more than any of the other tools in HS, really does a beautiful job of bridging both of those things. If you want to dig into all of the details of how this team works together and the effect, we can dig into all of that detail. If we want to know just the top 3 things each of these members needs to start doing tomorrow to make a more effective, high-performing team, we can provide that as well in that report. So I think that flexibility is fantastic, as well as I mentioned previously, the flexibility of being able to um, administer the GSI in a very dynamic way, meaning, again, we can do this with teams and groups on the fly, essentially, and that kind of, and sometimes that's the best way. If we're working with leadership teams or really any team, and we see that team having trouble, struggling, that kind of thing, that is a great way to take a break, get an external perspective, measure what is actually happening here, what is actually playing out, help the people then to recognize and see that. Everyone will be able to immediately connect with the profile at the end of that experience, because those colors represent what we just experienced taking place. So you always find there's a very easy acceptance of, yes, that's us, that's what's happening. And that then builds the language to how is that affecting us? And finally, moving forward, what can we do differently to drive more of what we want, and to again, each of us to contribute and bring to the team what we need to drive performance here. So I think those are all fascinating questions to be able to answer for teams and organizations, and to make tangible and actionable, to really drive and create the real sustainable and positive change that we are all about. So I hope that this has been helpful in communicating what is the GSI, very briefly reiterating, and then digging more deeply into what is the report content around that instrument, what is that giving us, and again, how can we leverage that most effectively. My key points again were, remember, it's actionable, use it. You can use it anytime, 15, 20 minutes. We can get this deep, rich diagnostic assessment. Secondarily, we need to remember why we're doing it, getting clear with the team around why we are looking at this, what the purpose is, and that's true across all HS tools and really all developmental kinds of instruments. Is very important to understand what we're about to see when we get into the report. Then as we get into the report, I think, as you saw, debriefing that as a team and as a group, navigating people through the results is a very enjoyable, fun experience. That interactive report keeps it high level enough that people can connect with everything, understand how it's all happening, zoom into and dig into their own areas of interest, and even get down to those immediate action steps in a very quick time period. So in any case, a wonderful instrument, very, very dynamic and flexible. I encourage you to use it. I hope this has been helpful time and time well spent for you. And if you have any questions about the GSI, would like to use it for your team, or perhaps one of your clients, groups, or teams, or have questions about any of the other instruments or anything that we do, please feel free to reach out anytime. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to the next opportunity. Thank you.